Could wine really have caused the fall of the Roman Empire? Let's peel back the past and discover how they drank, fermented, and stored wine in Rome. What did the Romans do right, and what deadly mistakes did they make?
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Modern wines today almost always contain sulfates, which keeps the wine from spoiling or oxidizing too quickly. This, however, is no modern discovery. This invention of wine prevention was already going on in ancient Rome during the 2nd century BC. We know this thanks to some of Pliny the Elder's writings. Quote, "When the Mishnah forbids smoked wines from being used in offering, it has chiefly reference to the Roman practice of fumigating them with sulfur, the vapor of which absorbed the oxygen and thus arrested the fermentation. The Jewish population carefully avoided the wines and vinegar of the Gentiles." Adding sulfur to wine was not the only addition the Romans contributed to winemaking. Just like the ancient Georgians, the Romans would press the harvested grapes by foot as well. This first pressed juice would often be held aside and used for the highest grade wines, which were considered to hold remarkable medical properties. The second batch would be pressed with an elevated concrete slab and wooden beams. This juice would collect into a basin below. This would occur between 1 and 3 times depending on which estate was handling the grapes. If the grapes were pressed for a 3rd time, this juice, which was quite bitter and tannic, would be used to make the cheapest wine at the time, named Lora. Similar once again to the ancient Georgians, the Romans would then store the juice in clay jars to age. This process generally lasted anywhere from 2 weeks to a month before it was moved to an amphora. An amphora is basically a very large ancient wine bottle used for storage. You could imagine how this may taste considering how long we age our wine today. There was no patience amongst the Romans, I suppose. When you have a much higher degree of mortality, like the average Roman soldier,
The frost. Sometimes it makes the blade stick.
I would probably down the wine as soon as I could as well. The kind of wine Romans enjoyed may be surprising to you, as most films depict Romans bathing in red wine that would put any glutton to shame. However, white wine was their drug of choice. They considered red to be barbaric. Now we have come to the terrifically aged wine of the Romans. These vintages didn't spend a few weeks under a floor. No. Sometimes these could have been aged up to 25 years. 2 of which were the most prized were the Falernian and the Surrentine. The latter was in need of 25 years of aging, whilst the former needed between 15 and 20 years. Pliny the Elder claimed that some of the Falernian wines could be so strong with alcohol they could catch fire if tempted too close to a flame. This may explain why the Romans chose to dilute their wines in various ways. The popular method of dilution was unsurprisingly just warm water, and strangely it could sometimes be diluted with seawater. I challenge you all to give that a try and let us know how it goes in the comments below. Oddly enough, we currently do not practice wine dilution here, which according to the Romans was quite barbaric as well. In fact, it was one of the reasons they considered the Gauls and other barbaric tribes to be so uncivilized in the first place. So it seems that we have more in common with the invaders of Rome than the inhabitants themselves. Cheers to that, I guess. What is quite amusing is that even though the Romans considered the Gauls non-dilution to be barbaric, they took other techniques of wine flavoring from them back to Rome. This makes tremendous sense when you consider Gaul is now modern-day France. Do you enjoy mulled or spiced wine? Well, you can thank the Gauls for that. Oftentimes, the go-to herbs of choice for the Gauls was lavender and thyme. They even went as far as to smoke the wine in a fumarium. These smoked wines were not used for leisure drinking, but were integral for medicine and rituals. A large Roman estate could produce up to several liters at a time, quite a vast amount by ancient standards, and even by some modern standards. Considering the very small amount of time the wine had to age, it is no surprise they added everything they could to enhance the flavor of the wine to make it more appealing. For example, Roman vintners would add dead yeast, lees, chalk, or even dust from marble. According to the Romans, this would help greatly reduce the acidic taste that the wine had. But what about sugar? Don't fret. They had all sorts of sweeteners as well. Often, the Romans would boil a portion of grape juice until it became very sweet and concentrated syrup. This then would be added back into the wine, making it more delectable. Honey could also be used. Sometimes as much as 6 to 7 pounds of it was added to just 3 gallons of wine. Frighteningly, there was another sweetener used by the Romans, lead. Yes, the Romans did in fact add lead to their wine for taste. This is because lead does have a sweet taste when consumed. Please don't try this. However, the lasting health effects were unfortunately largely unknown to them. Now, some people will tell you that trace amounts of lead may not be harmful to your health. Don't worry, the Romans threw that right out the window, as the average Roman citizen drank a liter of wine per day, which in turn means they consumed 20 milligrams of lead every single day. This lead came from the containers they used to store the wine. This deadly mistake led to the wine containing 2,900 parts per billion of lead, which is 1,000 times the acceptable modern dosage. Because of this, some historians considered it to be such a problem that they are now claiming that lead poisoning had a huge hand in the fall of the Roman Empire. What could have been if the Romans never drank lead in such large quantities? It's hard to say definitively that wine was the reason Rome began to fall. It is more likely it contributed to the Roman population being weakened and thus less prepared for an invasion of the Goths. One can argue the effects of lead poisoning alone was the first nail in the coffin for Rome. Lead poisoning can cause high blood pressure and brain, kidney, and reproductive health issues in adults. Symptoms of lead poisoning include headaches, stomach cramps, constipation, muscle and joint pain, trouble breathing, fatigue, irritability, and loss of sex drive. Unfortunately for the Romans, most adults with lead poisoning don't look or feel sick whatsoever. So imagine trying to defend yourself from an invasion with a population of people who look healthy but have a plethora of weakening symptoms. We can now see how lead, something so simple that was used as a sweetener that was unknown to the Romans, directly caused an entire population of at the time over 1 million to become sick but not look sickly, and thus they just weren't prepared for the Goths, and that was a huge reason that the Goths were able to come in and just attack a weakened population, and the Romans didn't know about it, and by the time, if they ever did figure it out, it was far too late. Once again, we've learned the power of something as simple as food can have on the world. Hell, maybe if the Romans never stored their wine in lead, we'd all be speaking Latin in togas still. So next time before you write off the importance of food or drinks, ponder wine, the true blood of the gods.
What do they say? He can't hold his liquor.
If you like what you learned, please like and subscribe. If you didn't learn anything, we thank you for joining us. And remember, your food choices impact the world and its future.